Hi, I'm R. Sky Palkowitz. Welcome to Washington, D.C. I'm with my colleague Ryan J. Wolowski, and we're in our nation's capital. As you can see, I'm standing right in front of the Capitol building. Washington is known for its politics, but it's also a great place for arts and culture. We're looking for some things to do, and we found a great little book signing that's happening just outside of Washington, D.C. in a place called Fort Washington, Maryland. We're about to go visit Adilah Barnes, where she'll be reading excerpts from her brand new book. And Ryan and I will soon unfold all of the wonders of Washington, D.C. See you in a moment.
Hey, it's Ryan, and I'm now in Fort Washington, Maryland, and the house that stands behind me, well, maybe it's not quite as recognizable as the National Capitol building, which we just saw, but it is as important because tonight we're here to find out about Adilah Barnes, who, those of you may know her from theater. She's also been involved in television. Probably saw her on the Roseanne show. She's also an author. She's won multiple awards, and she's here, well, this afternoon at sunset, and she's reading from her brand new book. This is a private residency party, quite a unique event. So we had to step away from the politics of DC and step into the art. Come inside with me, because she's here right now, and she's reading live. Come on in.
He stopped. He looked through me with those piercing eyes. I think he was struck most by my sincerity, because he gave me his full attention as I stood in front of him. During the short time we spent together in conversation, it was as if time had stopped and no one else existed in that crowded lobby. It was as if we were an invisible and impenetrable bubble together. Among other things, I remember blurting out something like, "You made me feel so proud as a child when I watched your movies in my little hometown of Oroville, California. I just want to thank you for all that you've given to black people and for changing the way we were seen on the big screen. Thank you for opening the door wider for actors like me." He listened. I was surprised to hear Mr. Poitier say, "And you, my dear, will do greater things." I said, "Oh no, Mr. Poitier, I could not possibly do more than you have." There must have been something in our body language that stopped anyone from interrupting us, because no one approached us. Once we were done talking, Mr. Poitier hugged and kissed me on the cheek. It was only when we began to move away from each other that fans began to yell out things like, "Mr. Poitier, Mr. Poitier, Mr. Poitier, may I have your autograph?" Or, "Mr. Poitier, I love your work." I stood in that hotel door room and watched Mr. Sidney Poitier move toward his black limo, graciously signing autographs along the way. He turned and gave me a smile with his final look as he stepped inside. I had approached him humbly. I spoke from my heart. Because of that, I had no need to ask for his autograph. As fate would have it, I met Mr. Sidney Poitier again a short while later at the 100th birthday celebration for the late Paul Robeson, given by Danny Glover's Roby Theater Company in 1998. I remember that evening in great detail. It was at the Actors Gang Theater, located at the time in Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard. Mr. Poitier had a front row seat, along with the likes of the late Brock Peters and Mamie Hansberry, sister of the late playwright Lorraine Hansberry. The place was packed. Danny Glover, my longtime friend from California's Bay Area, was hosting the event. Danny spotted me from the stage at one point and acknowledged me with a smile. I smiled back. A short while later, Danny came off stage and headed towards me. He bent over me while someone on the program was still speaking on stage. He whispered, "I have a poem here by Pablo Neruda. Alfred Woodard was supposed to be here and read it, but she can't make it tonight. I want you to read it." My heart began to palpitate as I asked Danny how long the poem was. He simply said, 3 pages. I gasped. 3 pages. He said, yeah, read it. I agreed on one condition. As long as you announce to the audience that this is my first time seeing this poem. He agreed. I read. That evening, I experienced one of my most fulfilling moments on stage. The icing on the cake was that I read in front of my childhood idol, Mr. Sidney Poitier. I again had his full attention. I almost melted in my seat as he complimented me on stage in front of over 200 people. He said something like, I was asked to read that poem, but declined. I could not have brought more justice to that poem than the young lady you just heard. Mr. Poitier had now seen me on stage and given me his nod. Danny smiled afterwards as he jokingly said to the audience, it's all in the casting. The audience responded with a spontaneous laugh. That evening held a very important lesson for an actor. Here are my italics. Always be ready. That's the first section. Thank you.
What acting role have you most been fond of?
It's the same one that you like.
Little John.
From Little John, where I played his sister, Ving Rhames' sister. And I liked that role because it was really the whole film, and you know Hallmark movies are always tearjerkers. You're going to cry by the end if it's a Hallmark movie. And it just portrayed the black family in such a loving way, and I just really felt proud of the work that we had created. So I would say that one. And also it was my biggest role. I had about 25 scenes and 4th billing down, so it was a huge, huge project for me. So I would say that's really one of my favorites. Erin Brockovich, another one, because it was so socially conscious and really had a message, and so that's another. There are others, but I would say probably top on the list would be Little John.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
I was sitting back here chuckling when you went through the part about your mother and the paying attention to the little things that we were given, like the broom, and I just,
Yes.
there were vivid images in my
Yes.
mind. My parents were West Indian immigrants, and they brought a lot of that culture that mixed in with the Southern culture that I grew up in
Yes.
the 50s and 60s, and so it was just incredible. And I also just wanted to say, you have inspired me as a writer. I'm an actor also, but as a writer you've inspired me because, as I think I was saying to the young lady here earlier, the one thing that I feel most compelled about is to tell my mother's story.
Yes.
And I'm being very cautious about it because in many ways I think my mother was abused in ways that maybe she didn't even understand. And so if I'm to tell her story, for me in some kind of way, it's to sort of make up for the pain and suffering that she had, and to use her life story as a way of showing that there was this woman who had this incredible inner spirit and beauty that was unfortunately not understood and appreciated much in her
Yes.
life.
Oh, that's a wonderful thing, and thank you for that. And of course, when we're telling someone else's story within our stories, we don't tell it all. I mean, there are sides of my mother that are private sides, and I would never unveil them in this book. And yet, at the same time, we can still be honest about what we share, but we don't always have to tell everything.
Ready for the camera.
Yes, it is. Always right. So let me hear from you.
I just got through coaching this girl team.
Excuse me one second.
We don't know what to do.
Oh, let's get them out.